You have just read about a few strategies for discerning the different learning styles of your students. As you watch this video, keep the following questions in the back of your mind. What are the different strategies I can use to discern different learning styles? How can I use this information to structure my teaching? You've already learned a little bit about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. This theory says that there are 8 different learning styles that we all possess in some combination. These different kinds of intelligences are linguistic, logical mathematical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. One of your students might be a naturalist and interpersonal learner, while you yourself might be a mostly logical mathematical learner. Once you understand the different intelligences of your students, you can start building your lessons to appeal to their individual learning styles, making it easier for your students to learn the material. The question is, how do you identify those different kinds of intelligences? One thing you can do is observe your students when they are misbehaving. If a student is talking when she should be listening, then she is probably a linguistic learner. The student that can't stop moving around in his seat is probably a kinesthetic learner. Note that humans are complex creatures, and just because a student is talking out of turn doesn't necessarily mean she is a linguistic learner. But when you pay attention to your students over long periods of time, you can start to see a pattern in their behavior, and that pattern will align you with one or more kind of intelligence. The way your students behave in front of you is probably different than the way they behave in front of their friends or families or when they are alone. So when trying to understand a student's particular intelligences, it's important to get information from as many different sources as possible. Talk to the student's parents. If your school keeps records, check them to see any sort of notes recorded by last year's teachers or awards the students may have won, or any behavioral problems that could still shed light on their intelligences. If the student has more than one teacher, try talking to the other teachers and see if they have noticed any particular pattern in the student's behavior. Try an experiment where you teach one lesson in 8 different ways, each way corresponding to one of the different kinds of intelligence, and take notes on how the students each respond and which activities they like or dislike. Finally, the best source of information is your student herself. Consider explaining the theory of multiple intelligences to your class and then talking it over with them. See what students think about their own intelligences. They probably have some great insights into what kinds of teaching they respond best to. Your lesson also includes a few tests you can have your students take to help reveal which of the multiple intelligences they possess most strongly. Understanding your students' learning style is important so that you can craft your instruction to fit their learning needs. But there is another reason you should know. There are certain turning points in the development of your students' talent and abilities. These experiences are either crystallizing, that is, they deeply motivate a person toward cultivating a certain talent and create a lifelong love of a particular subject or field, or these experiences are paralyzing. That is, they make students feel so embarrassed, shameful, or generally negative about a certain exercise or subject that they will try to avoid it altogether. If your student is a naturalist learner who might someday become a veterinarian or an ecologist, you want to know this early on so that you can support that student's natural abilities and help crystallize them. Create lessons that involve going outdoors and investigating nature. Don't keep that child locked inside and force them to learn from a book. And don't act negatively if that student decides to bring in a spider or a worm to look at, because you might create a paralyzing experience which will stop that child from reaching his or her full potential later in life. Let's review. In this lesson, you learned the 8 different types of intelligence included in multiple intelligence theory: linguistic, logical mathematical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. You learned a few strategies for figuring out what kind of intelligences are most prevalent in each of your students, including talking to parents, observing how students misbehave, talking to other teachers, checking school records, talking to the student directly, and observing how students respond to exercises that align with each of the 8 learning styles. You also learn that there are certain turning points in the development of your students' talents and passions. Crystallizing experiences help cultivate a student's passion and devotion to a particular subject, while paralyzing experiences do the opposite and may make a student avoid certain subject matter altogether. It is important to know a student's learning style so that you can create as many crystallizing experiences as possible, while avoiding accidentally creating paralyzing ones. Remember the questions you asked yourself at the beginning of this video. Now is a good time to answer these questions. Once you have done that, apply your answers to the themes of this video.